Welcome back, everyone, to another lovely episode of the Dev Diaries. And this time we're going to be taking a look at the new and amazing AMERICAAA rework. America! Today we're going to talk about freedom. Freedom! Yeah, I love it. So yeah, obviously the United States in Hearts of Iron 4 needed a bit of a rework, and so they're revealing it. It's okay. It's like literally, it's kind of okay. Just whatever. So what they wanted to kind of change around is the fact that the United States, obviously historically and due to game balance purposes, I might add, needs to be obviously very strong, but at the same time it needs to not be able to enter the war too early, because otherwise the Axis would just be screwed. So the United States needs to be essentially staying out for a long time, and if you're restricting the American from actually intervening in the war, then US is just kind of sitting around doing not too much, which well, I mean, you can argue about that, you can argue about ways on how to fix it, but yeah, that's essentially what they're trying to get around, while not actually changing, because obviously it is basically integral to how the game works for the United States and for the Axis. So their goal is to give the player more stuff to do in the lead up to the war, and getting a little bit more involvement with the peacetime politics and economics of the United States to get out of the Great Depression and to get into the international arena. So instead of a single national spirit to get rid of the Great Depression, it is now 3 levels that give a smoother curve out of the Depression, and you can actually see it in the focus tree over here. So you either get the chance of continuing the New Deal or re-establishing the gold standard. Interestingly enough, it looks like re-establishing the gold standard has some prerequisites that this player right now has not met. So I wonder if you perhaps will need something. Who knows? So yeah. Instead of just taking 3 focuses in a row to do what previously could be done in just one, we wanted the player to have to work a lot more to get out of the Depression, which is of course quite good, because the Depression itself is pretty much the defining event of the 1930s for the United States. And they enter the script-based Congress mechanic. Now, see, that's really funny, because they unveiled this, and then I'll just detour off a little bit. There was an announcement by this mod, the New Order Last Days of Europe. Of course it does not actually give me what I want. That's really annoying. Whatever. The creator of this mod, let's see if I can get the picture out from Discord. The creator of this mod, the New Order Last Days of Europe, actually unveiled his own amazing American like democracy Congress system. I can't find it anywhere, which is incredibly aggravating. I should have done this before. Really now. Oh no, this one, exactly. So he has just unveiled this, like literally at the same time. And look at this. This is actually UI that he put in the game, and yeah, so here it essentially shows you every representative from every state and what party are they supporting and all of that. But in here it works a little bit differently in that essentially for all of your decisions that you're going to be taking, you're going to need Congress support or approval for your government. And obviously there's a few events that you can fire to kind of influence how Congress works. Of course, you can see that you can grant statehood to Hawaii and Alaska, which are, I believe, way out of the game's time frame historically of when they were granted statehood, as they were still territories at the start of World War II. And then Puerto Rico, which still does not have statehood today. So, you know, you can go quite a bit ahead. I'm not sure what special measures will be, but you can also do lobbying efforts. So, you know, you can buy some congressmen to your side, obviously. Quote-unquote convince them that what you're doing is the correct course for the country. And yeah, so essentially the Congress mechanic for now is unique to the United States and simulates shifting majorities in both houses of Congress, so both the Senate and the House. It ties into a lot of things that we'll get into in a bit, but on a fundamental level, taking the focuses that reduce the penalties from the Great Repression will require you to have a majority in both houses. But will also reduce your support once you've taken it to stimulate members of Congress who voted for the proposal being unwilling to support you further without getting something in return. And we get to that later. So obviously, if you do your lobbying, all of your senators that are supporting you because of the lobbying will be expecting something in return. So you need to like invest in their states or do something for them. Kind of a House of Cards kind of thing, if you've seen that show. It's basically that, like, you're going to be needing to, quote-unquote, well, it's not really bribing, it's legal. So, yeah, that's actually kind of nice. I like the system. And, yeah. So, generally speaking, going with the incumbent in the presidential elections means you are more likely to lose support in Congress in the election, which is kind of weird, because usually in these games you have a snowball kind of system where you choose the incumbent and you keep stability, you keep support. And if the situation is particularly dire, going with the challenger will flip support and opposition. Beyond this, a number of decisions will allow you to gain support in Congress, from simple lobbying to bringing members of the Congress by investing in their constituencies to just regularly bribing them. So obviously there's a lot of flavor ways in which you can do that. Besides getting out of the repression, you also need to get Congress to sign off on the Selective Service Act, which is the gatekeeper focus of the Army Modernization Branch, and the Two-Ocean Navy Act, which is the gatekeeper for the Naval Branch. Now this is very actually the Selective Service Act, I've never read about it, so let's check it out right now. Selective Service Act. So obviously this is the one that, wait, no, 1917. Really now? Have you gotten the wrong act, Paradox? I mean, it's obviously the same. Selective training, not selective service. Did I read it wrong? No, they just typed selective service. Selective Training and Service Act of 1940. See, yeah, exactly. Because the Two-Ocean Navy Act, if we go ahead and look at that, that's also from 1940. And that's one thing I don't understand, is that they want to give the United States more to do between 1936 and 1940, and as gatekeepers for the modernization of the Army and the Navy, which is obviously quite important because at the start of the game, the United States, especially when it comes to the Army, is very much unprepared for war. Not as much for the Navy, but you know, definitely for the Army. They gatekeep them, quote unquote, with two acts that are, well, 1940 historically. So the Two-Ocean Navy Act was enacted in 1940 as well. Instead of those two being the first ones, it would be best if they were last, considering the timing of Focuses and Hearts of Iron 4, to be completely honest. Especially since the Two-Ocean Navy Act is very important because it is the one that essentially authorizes the massive expansion of the United States fleet so that it, you know, titularly can fight on two oceans at once, the Pacific and the Atlantic, without really, you know, causing troubles for itself. And it is the one that authorizes the construction of all the Essex-class aircraft carriers and the Iowa battleships. So it is the one that essentially kind of opens up the way to the building of the fleet that will eventually destroy the Japanese Empire. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think they really talk about the Army and the Navy stuff more. No, okay, so let's quickly go over how they are, which is, I mean, it's just regular Army and Navy stuff. So you're going to choose between battleship and carrier primacy, which, I mean, the Two-Ocean Navy Act authorized the construction of a lot of battleships and actually a lot of battle cruisers as well, which didn't end up getting completed, but that's a story for another day, the Alaskas. But at the same time, it also, you know, called for a massive expansion of the, essentially, Naval Air Force, Naval Air Service, or Naval Air Arm, however you prefer to call it. And again, these like either battleship or carrier thing is, like, I can understand why it would be there for gameplay, although not really, because carriers are much stronger in the game, and it's, you know, supposed to be that way. But I still don't understand, because the navies of the time were not choosing between battleships and carriers. They were doing both, if they were doing both. If they weren't doing both, they were only doing battleships. So I don't know, like, I feel like that choice should only exist if you're Germany, Italy, or, well, I mean, anyone whose resources are like really, really limited, but they still have a navy. Like, again, France, Italy, and Germany. Because it's like the Japanese were spending a much bigger proportion of their budget on the navy, and they ended up doing both, so they should be able to do both. The Americans and the British could afford to do both, although the British not as much in the later years. And yeah, I just don't understand why they keep doing these either battleships. It's just the thing that pisses me off, because it isn't really that big of a thing, but I don't know, whatever. And then after the Two Ocean Navy Act, you get also fund the Navy and expand the Marine Corps. So that's obviously what you do. And then the Liberty ships. So it's going to be a lot of bonuses to construction, most likely. A lot of bonuses to, Marine capacity, I'm guessing. Or Special Forces capacity. And, all of that stuff. Now, really, again, my opinion on this is that the Two Ocean Navy Act should be the last one. Or, well, maybe not the last one, but, one of the last ones. And it should be a big, giant boost to your construction. It should be a big thing that the other majors really feel. And then the Army stuff is that you have your special services, Army of the United States. I love that. Just makes you feel that much more American. Louisiana maneuvers, I wonder what that is. I wonder if you are going to get some interactivity out of that. And then the Women's Armed Service Integration Act, most likely something to increase your population, and maybe some bonuses to support companies to kind of represent how women are getting involved in that. And then there's a bit of tank stuff. Somehow you get to choose between tank destroyer doctrine and main battle tanks, even though they both got the Shermans and the tank destroyers. I don't know, whatever. And then the air stuff, obviously, strategic bombing or air support. You do know what they went in real life, and there's actually a nice bit of flavor. You can build a Pentagon. Yeah, America. Long live freedom. Then there's all the diplomacy and politics stuff, which we're going to get to now. Another aspect we wanted to add was to give the U.S. player a choice. Okay, there's actually this one. No, never mind. To become more active in the world earlier. As I said above, that comes with a host of issues. We want it to be a viable option, but not a no-brainer. This means that there will be a number of restrictions in the limited intervention branch, which is the one in the middle. If we look at... are we sure? Oh, no, never mind. It's actually here, after Continue the New Deal. So it's that one. First, you'll have to have enough support in Congress to take the focus. And a lack of war support means that quite a few members of Congress will break ranks over it, so probably just switch sides. Afterwards, you will have to choose between focusing your efforts on preparing to intervene in Europe or in Asia. Taking either of these focuses unlocks a number of decisions to try and build up public support for an intervention. Many of these decisions are tied to events around the world. Here is the U.S. protesting the Anschluss. So obviously, if the Japanese are invading China, you can probably embargo them. At least I hope so, because that's historical. And, it would also force the Japanese to attack the southern resource areas, but that's another thing. If Germany is invading Austria, Czechoslovakia, whatever, you're probably going to get some intervention goodies from that. And also, most likely, I'm guessing, Italy and the Soviet Union might have some ways of stirring up the old giant. And probably random countries, as they do say later that there's also generic intervention events. However, there is a small window to utilize these events, so obviously if you're letting it pass, you're letting it pass, which is good. Each decision adds something that is internally called an intervention strike, as in 3 strikes and you're out, except in this case it's 3 strikes and we start bombing. Yeah, freedom! A generic decision allows you to build support against the target if they do not have a specific decision associated with them. So again, if like Venezuela is played by a player and they're just going fascist and taking over South America eventually, the AI United States will get to invade you, most likely. Finally, once a country has 2 strikes against them, you can petition Congress to sanction an intervention, which will again require significant support. It is easier to gain a war goal against a country that is at war, and easier still if they are in an aggressive war. So this is how you gain war goals without being able to justify on people, if they're evil, rogue, aggressor states, which is fine. This will make it harder for you to pursue your other goals. So if you want to intervene in Europe on behalf of the Allies, you will most likely have to forego economic reforms for a while. Again, that's kind of okay because it's necessary for the balancing. And yeah, eventually what that ends up giving you is that if you're going democratic, or if you're staying democratic rather, you will have a relatively, tranquil game, but every once in a while, when someone does something really stupid, you really get to spread the freedom, which is, it's fine. It's what you'd expect. It's historically accurate. It doesn't go really ridiculously out of the way, and it doesn't break the balance of the game. Still, unfortunately, the United States is still going to be relatively boring to play. Now, the main problem with that, actually, is that the United States is just so powerful that you can really easily kill everyone. So really, it's not a question of, oh, look, you have to stay there a while to prepare, and you can't intervene in the first few years. It's like, that's fine. You can relatively powerful relatively quickly the early years, but really the problem is it's just boring as hell, because otherwise you're just way too strong, and yeah, that's kind of the problem. This does not really end up being a problem with the other ones because of a reason, the other ideologies, because of a thing that we're about to see. So yeah, the intervention mandates also are used to allow the U.S. to intervene in the Americas if someone violates the Monroe Doctrine. I'm guessing that they're talking about someone outside of, outside of the Americas, like there's a focus down there that says reaffirm the Monroe Doctrine, which is kinda weird, because, they never abandoned it. I don't know, whatever. There's no Pax Americana, though, anymore, so I don't know. Perhaps there just will not be an annoying American that really screws with any South American game. Okay, I don't know, whatever. What is there? So the intervention in general is something that you prepare a lot better now by using war plans. Completing the focuses unlocks the decisions to execute the corresponding war plan and gain a temporary bonus against a country, along with some other temporary bonuses. So again, for some reason, they just really like, instead of giving the United States more options, they're just making the United States have an easier time against their opponents, which is like, oh, really now? Because US is already very strong anyway. So, for example, if you, for some reason, wanted to invade Canada, and you managed to get the war goal, then you can have an attack boost against them, because, you're not already, like, much stronger than them. Well, whatever. Of course, by this point, a statistical majority of you might wonder why even bother with all this busy work, bribing senators, cutting deals with your representatives, when there is a world to be won. As promised, we wanted to add proper alternate ideology branches for the US. As we said many months ago in the dev diary about South Africa, we also look to try and open up new areas of the map for warfare to allow you to fight in different areas than trudging across the same parts of Europe. So we wanted to have a nice big civil war in the US. I wonder where they had this idea. We want tank battles south of Chicago, naval landings in Florida, blah, blah, blah. So we decided to not just put in one civil war, but two. That's 100% more civil war. Again, I really cannot fathom where they got the idea. You'll have to fight a civil war in either of the alternate ideology branches. For the curious, the branches straight down from WPA and Adjusted Compensation Act are Democratic ideology branches and will be part of the free update. So if we look here, the Democratic ones are the ones in the center, essentially. So on the left side, suspend the prosecution is the one that goes down and to be commie, Reds, and America First is the one that lets you be a fascist. Interesting name. You'll see a little bit more awesome America First stuff in a bit. And the other ones will be part of the DLC. In the left branch, appropriately enough, Jesus Christ. That's actually, I think I made that joke about the Japan tree, that they had the commies on the right. Whatever. You soften up your stance towards the commies. You can do this even if you don't intend to go fully communist, as it opens up a new way of gaining support in Congress. So this is kind of like what they're taking out of Death and Dishonor, really, is that you can kind of counterbalance the different ideologies by taking some of the focuses without necessarily going down and getting that ideology to be, dominant, which is, I guess, kind of fine. It makes slight sense, although I'm not sure exactly what prosecution suspend the prosecution is. It might be the prosecution of commies. I don't know, whatever. It might be the prosecution of anarchist terrorists. I don't know. On the right side, America First is self-explanatory enough. And then there's a, medium-sized branch on either side that essentially goes into how you're going to be, overthrowing the weak democratic system and setting up a true system of great Americanness. If you decide to be more radical, you can desegregate American society, which will trigger protests from the usual suspects, and the protests by themselves will not do anything. But if you decide to push harder towards communism, the protest will intensify and eventually spill over. The Union Representation Act is another such trigger that will cause protests. So, as you can see, this is kind of the event that will be coming forward. Like the Silver Legion will protest, and the Silver Legion are the political organization that was actually founded by Pelly, if you know, in KR and Kaiserreich. He is the national populist candidate for the American Union State. National populist dictator, the chief of the American Union State, and he's kind of a crazy Christian fundamentalist who doesn't like Jews, never would have thought. And essentially, like, the Silver Legion was his political party, was relatively, basically entirely irrelevant. But it is what they decided to pick as a fascist party for the US because it's like really the only option. There's also the German-American Bund that they could have gone with, but I mean, that one is it's got limitations, so yeah, not going too deep into it, it wasn't an option. Before the Civil War breaks out, there is a point of no return, after which it is only a question of time until the hostilities start. Damn it, we need Charles Curtis. So the point of no return, I wonder exactly where that will be, but I guess they're keeping it like mysterious or something. In the time between the point of no return and the actual start of the war, you'll get a number of events telling you how the situation is developing. I'm guessing like, National Guards mobilizing, riots happening, all that kind of stuff. These events have actual effects on how your position is like at the start of the war. I actually enjoy what they're doing with this because, again, it's like you need more interactivity, you need more flavor, and, even if they're copying it from Kaiserreich slightly, it will make the game better and more enjoyable. Again, it would just be even better if they extended this. For example, if an event tells you that a state has mobilized the National Guards, the revolter gets a fully equipped and quite capable division when the war starts. These events aren't intended to make the difference between winning and losing, but to give the war more flavor. Once the war starts in the communist branch, it is not like a regular civil war. Instead of the country and the military splitting in half, it spawned a new tag, the CSA. See, this is where I get confused, because you all know what the CSA means in Kaiserreich. It is the commies. And you know what the CSA means in real life. It's the Confederates. But, like, does this mean that the United States is going commie and the Confederates are revolting against the United States somehow? Or does this mean that they stole the name CSA from Kaiserreich? Like, what are they going to call it? The Communist States of America? Actually, I think they're already called that in in Hearts of Iron 4. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what they're... Okay, and now I need to go ahead and look it up. America Communist. Yeah, I think it's called the Communist States of America. It is called the Communist States. Okay, never mind. So, yeah. Apparently, they already did steal Kaiserr. See, it would have just been a lot more... You know, it would have made a lot more sense if it was just the USSA. You know, the United Socialist States of America. I feel like that would have been a lot better of a name. Because, I mean, that one in Kaiserreich is just, you know, it's just like a joke name. And it gets replaced almost every time. After someone, you know, actually goes down a CSA focus tree, you get the chance to change the name. But whatever. That's, I guess, what they're going for. So anyway, this will be removing CSA cores as territories for the US, which means that they, for example, create resistance when conquered into. Depending on how far down they've gone down in the communist branch, a part of the country might also declare its neutrality during the war. I'm guessing... I don't know, it's depending on, you know, who that neutral part is taking territory from. That either means that, you know, if you're going down the communist branch a lot, you will not have a neutral zone. But if you haven't gone down the communist branch a lot, you have got a neutral zone, or maybe the opposite. I'm not sure if the neutral zone is supposed to be helping the commies or the federals. I have no idea. You can still interact with this part for decisions, but so can the other side. So you can see down here that you can, you know, do stuff from the neutral block. And there's like other things that are hidden there, but I'm guessing it's like purchase weapons from like outside countries, because it looks like it costs more political power. I don't know, whatever. So obviously you at the -2 off-map civilian. See, that was confusing me, but yeah. Also, they're called the Unaligned States of America, which is a really lame name. But yeah, essentially, you're paying civilian factories to get infantry equipment, which is mighty fine, mighty good. Whereas in other countries, a civil war is something we must be very careful to ensure that the country is not completely crippled by the time the real war starts. Here, ACW2 will be the war the US gets into, and this merges into the Greater World War. Which is really fucking annoying, because I really hope that at least when you have won the Civil War, it annexes the other country despite you being in the World War. So, for example, if you're, I don't know, if you're doing the communist run, and then, like, you know, the rest of the Americans either stay neutral or go fascist, so they either join the Allies or the Axis. I sure bloody hope that you don't have to go kill Germany to, you know, annex fascist USA. I sure hope that you don't have to go kill British India and, you know, the UK and France to annex the US. Or if, you know, vice versa, you're doing something else. I really bloody hope that you do not have to actually have to go kill the Soviet Union to annex the commies, you know? Whatever. So there are limited objectives for you after you've won the American theater of World War II, but you can push decolonization in Asia and intervene in the Chinese Civil War while also working to reintegrate the breakaway states, which does hint that you're going to be annexing the breakaway states, but who knows, whatever. So that was actually for the lefties, you know, the pushing for the decolonization in Asia. And the only thing that really seems like it's there, it's the end monarchism and shatter the empires. And then you either get the alliance with the Soviets, which would be a hell of an alliance and it would win every game, or secure China. I wonder why that's like two different things. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, so essentially, the other branch is obviously the fascist one and works along similar lines. You also get a branch leaning down from America First that you can use even if you don't want to go full fascism, a sort of flirting with fascism, allowing you, for example, to investigate the opposition through the House Committee of Un-American Activities. So actually, if we go over the focus trees for the political line, you can see that just going over to the left first, you get a branch that's about desegregation and decolonization, which is, I guess, kind of fine. The U.S. never, obviously, during World War II, they actually didn't desegregate the armed forces, so they were still segregated. Then you have in the middle kind of a economy branch, if you may, the Union Representation Act being the first one. And then some wealth redistribution, guaranteed the American dream, obviously. And then you reintegrate the states that had been broken off. Then you get the Reach Out to the Wear group, which was kind of like a group, a sort of, you could say, organization within the Communist Party of the USA. And that gets you in contact with the Soviets. Then in the middle there is the WPA, the Work something agency. I don't remember what it's called. Work Protection Agency, I think. I don't know. And that's still democratic, but obviously you can take it, I'm guessing, as well if you're a commie. I don't know, whatever. Which is also a lot more stuff that has to deal with the Great Depression, the Federal Housing Act, to create the glorious projects. Then in the middle there's some foreign policy stuff for both the neutrality and the limited intervention. And then on the right side, kids, if you reestablish the gold standard, you will end up turning America fascist. Awesome. So obviously you go down America first and get some protectionism going because, yeah, make America great again. Then you empower the HOI4, which is the House Committee for Un-American Activities, which is the one that ends up, you know, being so famous because of the Red Scares. Obviously, you know, not exactly a nice thing if you're not someone that America likes. A very, very nice thing if you're a fascist USA, enlisting the services of, you know, good American patriots. And then there's the Voter Registration Act. You know, it's all about how you count the votes, and it's really not about how the votes are cast. And then on the right side is really the real fascist stuff, because that one was just the flirting with fascism. This one is really like the, you know, going to bed with it. Then it's allying with the silver shirts, which are the Silver Legion. There's a tiny economy branch stuff. You can deregulate the banking sector, which is kind of weird, because if you think about it, like, it makes sense because they suck up to them, but at the same time it's kind of funny because wouldn't there be, see, that's the problem with Paradox sometimes, because they really need to be really PG-13 about all of this. See, the silver shirts were, you know, about as anti-Semitic as the Nazis, so in terms of the banking sector, I'm pretty sure there would be like, they should have just called it restructuring the banking sector and hinted, along with deregulation, hinted at the fact that they were also taking over all the Jewish banks or something. I don't know. See, that's not something that's ever going to go into a normal Paradox game these days, but I mean, that doesn't stop me from complaining and memeing about this stuff. And then there's invite foreign support, so obviously you get Germany to help you out. You can recruit the Free Corps. I'm not sure exactly what that is all about. I'm guessing it's going to be German volunteers coming to the United States after the war is, you know, after war has started. You work with the Bund, which is the German-American Bund, which I was talking about earlier. And then you honor the Confederacy. How lovely. Which is only, I believe, after you've won the Civil War. And then there's, you know, go ham on everyone and kill everything. The War Powers Act, you seize some stuff in the Americas. You go ahead and invade everyone in Asia and South America. So obviously, you know, that kind of stuff. So obviously, the Civil War and the fascist branch is going to be about all of that. So the Voter Registration Act ensures a comfortable majority in every election, but triggers a wave of protests. If you decide to push even further and publicly ally with the Silver Legion, you will trigger additional protests that put the country on the road to civil war. Like the Communist branch, a number of events will determine what the starting position is, but the roles are reversed. Where in the Communist branch, a part of the country tries to break away, in the Fascist branch, the country revolts against your leadership and tries to oust you from power, forcing you to fall back into a power base that you set up in advance. You set up a power base in advance, right? So this is again hinting that if you don't prepare for the Civil War, you're gonna get fucked. Oh, that's that is not what I intended to do. I accidentally clicked the X to close it. Anyway, going back into it. America, yeah, fuck yeah, we're coming to save the fucking day. Okay, so if we go back down to here, parts of the country will declare support our opposition to your fascist state, leading to different front lines, which is kind of nice. So obviously they're kind of going for, you know, kind of a American Civil War I mechanic where states are declaring for and against the Confederacy. So obviously you have much of the professional military on the other. Wait, what? See, I thought that I read wrong the first time, but wouldn't the professional military be on the side of the, you know, fascists? What? I don't know. See, usually in these kinds of things, see, what they're going for is like the military protects the republic or something. But I don't know. I feel like I really don't know how to feel about this. See, also, the other thing that they're setting up is like the country is revolting against you. So, you know, you have people who are opposed to fascism going around and organizing armed forces against you, which would include, you'd think, more irregular formations. You know, National Guard, reserves, militias. So obviously you'd have your own militias, but since you're in the government, you probably would have most of the military on your side because you're the government. I really don't understand. I really don't understand. Whatever. Yeah, let's just not even think about this. So you have to rely on hastily raised militias to hold the line until you can get back on your feet. You might have to cut some deals and appeal to the locals to get them to accept that you are on their side. So I don't know what these deals will involve, but I guess that's, you know, whatever. And then you honor the Confederacy, so obviously, you know, once you have won the Civil War, you are left with a U.S. that is safely fascist, meaning that you are ideally poised to conquer the rest of the world. So we decided we might as well give you the focus tree to do just that. The War Powers Act lessens the stability impact of being in a war, and you can take the first steps abroad as you politely ask Canada to give the territory between you and the Alaskan border. The event may or may not be called Vancouver or War. It's kind of nice that they're, like, I get what they're going for. It's like the Danzig War of the Americas, you know, it's my last territorial demand, all of that. I like that in a way. The Canadian corridor, it's not the Danzig corridor. Yeah, and you continue in this fashion until at last you demand global hegemony and give all other majors an ultimatum to either become puppets or go to war, which is like, yeah, see, I don't think they're going to accept. I do enjoy what they're doing with that because it's absolutely insane, and that's the point, because, you know, I feel like the fascist USA run might, you know, be kind of nice also because, if you know, the Berlin-Moscow axis, which is like the other big ridiculous thing that can happen that, you know, joins the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. If that happens, there's like an event where essentially a bunch of other countries, and a bunch of other countries, I mean like a lot of them, like, you know, almost all of them, get an event to like join a faction that opposes that, and so it becomes kind of like a big, you know, one block versus another block, massive world war. I feel like they, you know, they're going with kind of that because I'm guessing you might be joining the Axis as the fascist USA, or might not be. If you might not be, then you're gonna be obviously going against Germany. But this might like galvanize all the other major powers to, you know, form an anti-American faction. So, you know, you have Britain and the Soviets kind of, you know, overlooking their differences and joining, maybe even with Japan, against the United States, or maybe even Britain with Japan, you know, revitalizing the 1902 alliance against the American, you know, would-be hegemons. I feel like that would be great because it would be making the late game a lot more difficult for the fascist USA, and it would make kind of a challenge. I mean, you'd win in the end, obviously. It would make kind of a challenge on a global scale. You know, you'd be trying to conquer the world essentially. I don't know. I feel like it's a good thing that it's there. So yeah, along the way, you will have most likely gobbled up all the small countries that otherwise make conquering the world such a pain. And that is all. So there's this diary. It was okay. I mean, honestly, you can't expect anything that great, but it's fine. Then there's another thing that gives... Actually, I'm much more excited for this than the reworked Americans. It's the mines, which I didn't really check out, last week, but yeah, I'm going to be adding these into. So essentially, they're putting in naval mines, which is a very overlooked aspect of World War II that honestly doesn't even go into a lot of much more hardcore strategy games, because a lot of much more hardcore strategy games really focus a lot harder on not naval, exactly the opposite, land and sometimes air warfare, and they don't really care all that much about the naval stuff. But this is actually very, very important, because it's actually an area denial tool that almost everyone used, and it was actually a big part of the essentially British versus German struggle for control of the North Sea and the Atlantic. Obviously, naval mines, you don't really put them in an ocean because ships are supposed to be going on them, so it's supposed to be in a relatively narrow sea zones like the Baltic and the mouth of a port, and obviously like the British Channel, all that kind of stuff. So minesweepers are essentially mine layers, and minesweepers are going to add a new dimension to the Navy, control of Navy zones, sea zones, because the more mines you have in an area, the more difficult it is going to be for you to gain naval superiority there, and obviously it's also going to be doing damage to the fleets of the enemy that they have there. And then it's going into another element, which is the ship designer, which unfortunately we do not know yet exactly how that's going to work, but essentially you can modify destroyers and light cruisers to lay down or to sweep mines, or maybe only destroyers to sweep mines, but as well as submarines can also lay down mines with the correct tech, and that's obviously pretty good if you're Germany, because you might be focusing on submarines yourself. Mines can also be dropped from the air with laking techs, and that's actually something that both sides really looked quite hard to develop in World War II, especially the Germans. Both of these unlock new missions for navies and air wings, so that gives a few more options on how to use your navies and your air fleets to gain air superiority and to gain naval superiority. To get rid of the mines, you need minesweeper-capable ships. This unlocks the naval mission to sweep mines and slowly work at clearing areas. Minesweepers are also nice to include in your fleets, as they will be then assumed to travel ahead of the fleet and reduce the impact of mines on them. So it will be creating a kind of, you could say, back and forth mechanic where you're sending out your fleet, trying to push away the enemy fleet so you can minesweep, but the enemy fleet will be trying to obviously lure you into an area where you have more mines. So, kind of that kind of play is what we are going to be looking forward into. I'm not sure if the AI can actually use this stuff. I do hope that it can, but whatever. And yeah, so there's also another technology, which is degaussing, that can be researched after magnetic mines. So obviously there's a big old tree that you can, side tree, you could call it, that you can research about mine warfare, which is A+. This was employed in World War II to reduce the magnetic signature of ships and make them less likely to set off mines, which is actually something that they put in the Canadian focus tree for Together for Victory, I believe, the ship degaussing. But I don't know what it does, because I've never played Canada with Together for Victory, and I've never looked at the bonuses. And when I looked it up like a year ago, I was like, why are they putting it there? Because there's no naval mines, and now they're putting in naval mines. Good. What do mines exactly do then? Well, they blow stuff up. I would have never known. Their explosive results are shown on the map as accident reports, and there's a new tab under Naval Losses Statistics interface if you want to dig into details, which is great because, you know, you see more stats is good. As ships operate or move through a zone, they will risk running into mines. This can both lead to minor damage as well as outright sinkings. The best way to avoid this is to make sure that the area is swept free of mines. But as mentioned above, having your ships travel with sweeping capable ships makes it safer for it all. Mines also have passive effects about naval superiority, because having mines in the area helps to amplify the effects of your navy, because if you know where your minefield, you're going to be putting your ships into other areas. And if there's minefields in an area, you can suppose that there's less enemy ships, so you can cover a bigger area with less ships, if that makes any sense. This can be seen in our new naval screen, which is the naval equivalent of the state view. So yeah, you can see it over there. You have the lovely naval terrain. You have a lovely it's a little bit like the air superiority stuff. It also shows the air superiority. And you can see also the amount of mine coverage, you could call it. You can see one side is 13% and the other side is 15%. So yeah, other than that, in blowing ships up, mines will slow down enemy ships since they will need to be more careful and increase the invasion penalty to coastal areas. So obviously, they are a great defensive tool. And I do really enjoy what they're adding here, because I think it's going to add a new layer of depth, which is something that naval combat needs. And in general, I mean, it's just good that they're adding more mechanics that are generally less well known in World War II strategy games. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that is the end of that. So I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you soon.